Alright you guys, this is going to be our first ZBrush project tutorial. So if I've edited this UI a little bit, if you haven't watched the UI editing tutorial, go and do that first. Some of this stuff is moved around. It'll probably be important for you guys to at least recognize what's going on up here. So I'd highly recommend doing that before you start on this. Other than that, nothing's really changed much. We're going to come over here, select our cube, draw it out. I'm going to hold down shift so that it snaps to that orientation. Hit T to jump into edit mode. You can see I've got my box around it now. Make polymesh 3D. Now my full UI is up. You can see kind of what's going on here. I'm going to turn on perspective. And I'm going to hit Control D to just subdivide this a few times. So I think the first thing that I'm going to show you guys is bricks. That's relatively simple. If I hit X, I'm going to open up my symmetry on my object, and you can see that I've got two dots on here now. And if I sculpt on one side, it'll do that to the other. You can control symmetry through your transform drop down, and here it is. So if I wanted it to be symmetrical in Y instead, I could turn that on, and now it's symmetrical in Y. I think for now we're going to keep it in X though. And I'm just going to hit BCB to go into my clay buildup brush, or I've got my nice little drop down over here, so I can just come over here and click clay buildup. Either way works. So there's a couple of ways that you can approach everything in ZBrush. For now, I'm just going to show you this simple sculpting technique for doing bricks. So I'm just going to start drawing this brick out, right? There's nothing fancy going on here. I'm just kind of like, that's roughly the shape of a brick. It's a little sculpty, but it'll get the job done. And then I'm going to do another brick right next to it. And since I've got my symmetry on, you can see it's drawing it on the other side. And I'm just going to use this clay buildup brush to kind of build up another brick. So it's going to look kind of like that. It's not super even or anything. Maybe we'll do another brick kind of right here. You know, if you're thinking of bricks tiling, they're going to offset just a little bit. And this isn't the best way to do bricks probably, but it is quick and easy. And for this project, that's all I'm really worried about. And we'll do another brick down here. You can kind of see I'm blocking this out. Okay, so that's easy. I'm going to clean some of this up now. We're a little loose on everything. This guy probably needs to come down a little bit. And these guys can come up. Let's see if we can't Control Z a little bit. See if we can't even these guys out because this brick is super wonky. Okay, something like that, and then we can clean this up here, and we'll do another set of bricks right here. So this is fine. This isn't, like I said, probably not the ideal way, but it's a good sculpting technique. It just gets you used to everything. And so I think it's a good place to start. I can hold down shift and go into my smooth brush and block this out. That's not really giving us the best result. What I'm actually going to do is hit BTD and go into my trim dynamic brush, or I can click up here and I've got it. I'm just going to scale my brush up a little bit, start flattening this brick out. But now it starts to feel more like a brick. It's a little uneven, and that's good. No brick is actually going to be super straight. And so just taking that trim dynamic brush, I can come in here, carve out what I want. This is going to start to feel a little bit better. So that looks okay. It's not great. And it's realistically not the best way to do bricks, but it's a nice, easy starting point. So another thing that you could do is, if you wanted to, you can come over here to your subtool, click append. We're just going to append another cube. Let me click on this guy now so you can see I've got a whole other cube here, and I'm going to scale this guy in, and I just hit W to go into my move tool. Scale it this way, pull this guy in. That's roughly the size of a brick, right? Sure, that looks good. Now we're just going to scale this guy until he fits right. Okay, and he's a little bit of a thin boy right now. Let's stick that in here. Scale it a little bit more, scale them out some. Okay, so what I can do is I can come in, and we'll just subdivide this brick a couple times. Then take my clay buildup brush to this guy and spend some time just sort of sculpting on him, right? Just trying to break up that shape a little bit. And I'll hold down Alt and sculpt into it some. And sculpt it back out. I'm just trying to break up that surface a little bit. No brick is going to be totally even and perfectly square. So that's fine. Then I might smooth it out some, and then take my trim dynamic brush and just start to push back into this guy a little bit. So quite a bit of pushing here on this guy. So now he's starting to feel a little bit like a brick. Not super in love with the sides on this guy or anything, but that's all right. Maybe you want to chip the edges a little bit, wear it down. Depends. It's all about how much detail do you want to put into these bricks right now. You don't have to go too crazy. So I could say, all right, I'm happy with that brick. Now if I go back in my move tool and I hold down Control and I click and drag, multiple subdivision levels. Right. So let me. Anytime you get that error, it's complaining because I've subdivided this mesh. So if I step down it, you can see I'm just hitting Shift D. It's maintaining that information on it. Now D is going to go up in the subdivisions. If I delete lower, I don't have multiple subdivisions on it now. It's just that one subdivision. So now if I Control click and drag on this guy, I can drag off another. And so now I've got 2 bricks. And I can Control click again, and now I've got 3 bricks. And so Control click and drag one more time. There's 4 bricks. So all it's doing is masking this guy off. So I'm just going to Control click and drag. And now I can place this guy, and let me hit this button right here. We'll center the pivot of all these things. And I can just scale it down a little bit and say, okay, well, I'm happy with those bricks. Now I can Control click again and drag down. Now I've dragged out 4 bricks. Hooray! And I'll just offset those a little bit. Control click down. Offset it this way. And you know, realistically, if you were doing real bricks, they'd probably be more pushed together than I'm doing these, but that's all right. We're not too worried about art right now. We're just trying to get everything blocked out. Control click and drag again. Drag out some more bricks. All right, so I think that's all right. We got some bricks now. Once again, I'll center this up using this little go to unmasked mesh center. We can straighten this up a little bit, and maybe I'll scale them down some. Yeah, something like that. That looks okay. Now, problem is all these bricks look exactly the same, and that's not good. So if you did do this method, you should come back through here with your trim dynamic brush and edit them some. And maybe even take your clay buildup brush and stroke through some more of these. And you just want to change these brushes up, right? So if I was going to say, all right, well, let's go in and change up some of these guys. And maybe I push in on this side and we get kind of a nice ridge on that guy. Then I can use my trim dynamic brush and just kind of come back through on these guys again. And it's going to start breaking these up, and they're going to start to feel more like natural bricks. And you can see that these aren't just the same brick tiled over and over and over again. So push this in. Yeah, might be a little too much on this guy, but that's all right. And then now we can do the same here. Okay, so now we've got some unique kind of looking bricks. And I would tile, if you guys were doing this method, tile it across all of them. This method works too. Nothing wrong with either of them. It's just a different way to skin the cat. Okay, so we're doing pretty good on time. I think the next one I'll show you guys is just a big rock. And so there's a couple of ways we can go about this that are also really easy. So let's say this side we were going to do a big rock. I'm going to turn off symmetry because you can see if I'd started sculpting on this side of the guy right now, it would also sculpt on that side. I don't want to do that, so I'm going to turn off my symmetry and hit X. You can see that that other dot disappears, and what that dot is, it's just the correspondence to the other side. So hit X, that goes away. And we're going to say I'm going to make a big dot or a big rock on this side. So I'm just going to start creating topology, right? And I'm just pushing hard with my clay buildup and pulling this out. But you can see pretty quickly it starts to stretch these polygons. And I'm not super in love with the way that that looks. I got some weirdness going on here. Let's pull that back. So our secret here is going to be Dynamesh. So if I hit Dynamesh on this guy, and I'm going to hit no, what this is asking is if you want to freeze the subdivisions before you entering Dynamesh. And because we've subdivided this geometry, this cube, when we first started out, it's asking if we want to try and maintain those by freezing them, and this button right here is what it'll do. Basically, it says get rid of your subdivision levels, but kind of keep them, and then you can hit this reconstruct subdiv later, and it'll try and build them back in. It's just usually not worth it unless you're trying to retopo down from your current mesh, and most of the time you're just going to retopo anyway. So I don't mess with it a whole lot, and I'll just say no and tell it to go ahead and dynamesh. So this looks okay. So now I can keep sculpting out my rock. I just want to keep pulling this geometry out. So sure, we got kind of a rocky shade. This is probably a little higher than I actually want it to be. So this looks okay. I'll dynamesh it again. And you can see it's just kind of smoothing that out. So then I'm going to take my trim dynamic brush. BTD is the shortcut for that. And I'm just going to start knocking some of this guy off, right? I don't know how much I'm going to knock off yet. I'm just sort of playing it by ear. I'm going to push my focal shift out a little bit more so I can get kind of a harder edge on this guy. And just start shaping this. Now I'm not, like I said, I'm not too concerned about art. If your rock isn't the most rocky rock on the planet, that's okay. I just want to see that you kind of mess with the brushes. You're sort of learning how to make these interesting shapes and stuff. We can all sort of move out from there. So maybe I grab my move brush. I'm going to hold down Alt to pull this out a little bit and just give this rock a little bit of character. Something like that. Then we can go back into my trim dynamic brush and start to chop this a little bit more. So this rock's it's okay. It feels kind of boring right now, but I'm not trying to make the most interesting rock on the planet. I'm just trying to make a rock. So smooth out some of this stuff around the bottom. And I would honestly, for any of you guys, I would recommend going in and getting some reference on like what do rocks look like, how do rocks grow, what kind of a rock are you making, what's the texture on it going to look like. All those things are important questions to ask. So I'm just going to use the clay buildup and build up a little more texture to this guy, and maybe even do something kind of like this so that it's sort of growing out that way. And I can go back into my trim dynamic and push back into this a little bit more. You can see we're doing some interesting, well, I don't know how interesting it is, but we're doing some rocky stuff, right? Maybe I want to push in on this top bit a little bit, flatten it off. Start to planarize this a little more. Sure. Maybe we got one side that's just really cut short. So we've got a rock. It's not a great rock, but it's a passable rock. Not in love with it. But for the purposes of this tutorial and this project, it's good enough. It's a rock. It's nothing special. Okay. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to call that good enough. My pride as an artist is too much. We're going to grab my clay buildup brush and sculpt this guy out a little bit. And actually, I do want to take this opportunity to show you guys the Sculptor's Pro mode. It's kind of cool. What Sculptor's Pro mode does is you can see what my topology looks like right now. When I turn on Sculptor's Pro, it's going to retopologize as I sculpt. So if I turn this off, just so you see the difference, it doesn't actually retopologize. We're just moving the faces that are here. Sculptor's Pro actually retopologizes as I sculpt. And so whereas before, if I'm not using Sculptor's Pro and I'm sculpting on this guy, I would have to consistently re-dynamesh as I sculpt it out. But here you can see it's doing that on the fly. It's sort of like automatic quick dynamesh or something. It's a super freaking cool tool. It's new to, I don't remember if this is ZBrush 2018 or 2019, but you guys get the idea. So now I'm just going to grab my trim dynamic and just start polishing this guy back off. And let's just cut this back into another rock. Make him a little more interesting of a rock now. He's got this sort of cool split in him. And then this, when Sculptor's Pro is on, it adds detail based on the size of your brush. So if I make this brush really small, drag really tightly, you can see that it's going to clean up that edge a lot. You can see how much geometry it's added through here as it sculpts that out. So it's kind of cool. but it's not super clean either. You would want to probably Dynamesh and smooth some of this out once you were done. So if I hit this with a smooth brush, you can see it polishes it off, but it's also adding to the density of my topology as I'm doing that. Let's just trim dynamic, keep cleaning this guy up a little bit. Some interesting rocky shapes going on here. This feels more like a fun rock. He was a boring rock before. Now he's going to parties and stuff. So let's just sculpt this guy out just a little bit more. And then just because this is a tutorial, I'm going to have to call this good enough. Still not super in love with this rock, but at least now it feels more like an interesting rock. So once I'm done with this, I may, let's say I was happy with that. I'll turn off Sculptris Pro mode. I've got Dynamesh. I'm just going to control, click, and drag to re-Dynamesh. And now you can see my topology is a lot cleaner. So that's before Dynamesh, after Dynamesh. So you can see it just cleans that up a little bit. And then I may go in and smooth stuff out, or you could increase your Dynamesh resolution to add some topology to it. So if I Dynamesh it now, it's going to think about it for a second, but now you see I've got a much denser, much tighter Dynamesh. But then I can smooth this out and polish it up and clean some stuff if I wanted to. I'm not too concerned about it for just tutorials purpose, but if you guys wanted to keep your Dynamesh and just push it a little bit, that's how you would do it. So I'm going to call that a happy rock. I think I'll cover a nose in this first project too, so we'll just start on this guy right here. I'm going to turn my symmetry back on.